What?
You're talking a lot.
Oh, all right.
You got to save all this stuff for the podcast.
All right.
You ready?
Yes. I've been
Ready, Brave?
shut down.
Ready. Okay. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Okay.
Loud and clear. Here we are, Real Recovery Talk. I am your host, Tom Conrad. In today's episode, we've got Benjamin B.
What's happening, everybody?
That was cool.
Right?
And we got Brave.
Hello, everybody.
What's up, Brave?
How are you, Tom?
Good. How are you?
Doing
Is that
well.
mic good? Is that comfortable?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming on.
Thank you. Thank you for asking me.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, listen, first things first. Thank you for tuning in on the podcast app, whichever one that is that you choose to use. We're on Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play Music, Apple Podcast, and if there's any other ones, we're on those as well. Thank you for watching on YouTube. If, in fact, you do find value out of any of this, you can please send it to somebody that would help us out a lot. And, if you want to do that whole like and subscribe thing, whatever, that'd be cool too. In the end, if you want to reach out to either myself or Ben, you could always reach us, Tom at realrecoverytalk.com and Ben at realrecoverytalk.com. Right, Ben?
Yes.
And ultimately, what we're trying to do is help you turn your mess into your message. Right, Ben?
Correct.
All right.
That is confirmed.
Confirmed, Captain. So what's up, Brave?
Not much. I'm here at Rock Recovery, where I've been for the last couple of months. Getting towards the end of my stay.
Uh-oh.
Yes.
How you feeling about that?
I'm present. It's funny because as you asked that, my brain goes to that feeling wheel, right? That, it's interesting because it's not my first time in treatment. And it's different because it's one of my first times in treatment after being sober.
What do you mean by that?
So I first got sober in 2013. That was my first time in treatment ever, and I had a couple of treatment episodes. And when I first went into treatment, I had some very serious consequences. Had an arrest, had felonies hanging over my head. Was about to lose my job at the time, wasn't talking to my family, some really serious stuff that was enough to get me to go to treatment. Not because I wanted to be sober or stop using at all, but because something had to change. And
that was in 2013?
It was in 2013.
Okay.
What was your drug of choice back then?
What got me into treatment was methamphetamine.
Okay.
Alcohol was my first love.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
So there's so much that, at least in my head, is bouncing around right now about like topics that we can talk about. I'm not going to try and direct it because I'm sure it'll just kind of go naturally in the direction it needs to go to. But yeah, I want to mention I've known Brave for how many years now? Probably 5 or 6 years,
at
6,
least.
7,
Yeah.
something like that. Brave and I originally met I had a different Friday night home group than I have now down in Delray. Clubhouse called Crossroads, and Brave and I got to know each other really well, and he was just always seriously like a beacon of recovery in those rooms. He was like a magnet, man. When anytime Brave had something to say, like, myself and other people paid attention big time. I just want to throw that out there so we have a little bit of history.
Well, I remember when Ben finally, or what, not finally, but somebody had mentioned to Ben about you coming to us, and Ben was like, we have to take Brave. Whatever, it doesn't matter. We have to take Brave. And we're like, well, who's Brave? So no, I mean, he was obviously very adamant about you coming here. And, like I agree, though. I mean, we tell people every time they walk into the door here to be an asset to the community, and you have been that. And but I want to get back to more of the. You went to treatment in 2013. Take us through that. What did that look like?
So it was my first time in treatment. I had no idea what to expect. I really thought that going to treatment was going to make me stop using, and I was really upset about that. I remember crying the night before because I did not want to stop. I didn't know at the time that was my solution to everything. But I really didn't. And I did 30 days. I completed. I got out on a Thursday from residential. I went to a meeting on Thursday, went to a meeting on Friday, went to a meeting on Saturday. And Saturday, right after that meeting, I went back to doing everything that got me arrested in the first place. So from the beginning, I struggled. And then I was out for a month or so, kept getting sanctions. And then I went into treatment again for 2 weeks. And that's where I met the guy who walked me through steps the first time. And that's where my recovery journey started in 2013. And again, I got sober because I didn't know what to expect. I had no idea what sobriety was. I had no idea what life was about at the time at 37 years old. And it worked. It worked. The steps worked. My journeys through AA. And it worked for a while until until I relapsed.
How long did it quote unquote work for? How many years?
Almost 9 years.
9 years.
Yeah, almost 9 years.
You stayed sober for 9 years?
I did. Right from the get-go, I was blessed to have guys ahead of me that gave it to me pretty straightforward. They never diluted the message. And I walked through my steps the first time. It was about a month and a half. And as soon as I was done, they said, go to the white vans and hand your number out. First guy that walked me.
Oh, I see. Okay. I get it.
I was down here in Florida.
Okay, but pause there because somebody's listening and they're like, wait a second, what's that mean? Go to the white van and hand your number out. Can sound a little weird.
It does. So, South Florida is this, insane experiment of recovery that you don't get anywhere else in the country. I think there is little pockets around the country, but I'm from down here. I lived here for 30 years. I had no idea. People come down here to get sober, to get clean, whatever. And, as we are somewhere where we're not allowed to manage our own lives, we get driven around in white vans, and taken to meetings and taken to places. And that's where the new guy or girl are at. And the people that walked me through steps knew that that's where the answer was at, in me sharing a message of hope, sharing a message of recovery. And that worked. And I went in and I started sponsoring guys right away. And I dove, and I was in the middle of AA. And that's where my journey began. And I'll always have that. Even when I picked up again, I never ever questioned what I found through that process. That was a constant. I also had to acknowledge that whatever I was doing when I picked up again wasn't really working, and that's been a journey in itself.
What is that when you say that? What I was doing? So you stayed sober for 9 years and you picked up. When did things start? Because when we talk about, okay, this is a great example. You're sober for 9 years. You don't just randomly one day pick up. Something led up to that. I call it the prelapse. There's something that is, what did that look like for you? Like if you're looking back on that, maybe it was 30, 60, 90 days before you actually picked up, something changed. What do you think that is?
Yeah. Well, it was actually a couple of years.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yes. I mean, looking back, I'm starting to, and I'm okay with not knowing exactly what happened, but being presented with different spots, different experiences along the journey that I can learn from. So I'm from down here. I had a very strong recovery community down here. And then as life would have it, I got married, moved up to Illinois. And then about not even 6 months into us living in Illinois, my mother came to visit. And her dementia had gotten advanced enough where in good conscience, we couldn't let her go back to be on her own. So she ended up staying with us. New marriage. I moved up there for my spouse's job. New environment, no roots. My mom moves in. I become a full-time caregiver. Her dementia continues to advance. I decided to go back to school, which was perfectly fine. I go to school full-time. I start working full-time. And then COVID hits. And then my mom, my spouse, and I are locked within this house. And it just things start unraveling. And I never stopped doing what we do. I did the Zoom meetings. I kept working with guys. I was sponsoring guys on Zoom. But I also didn't realize at the time that the fears were creeping in. And I slowly but surely, I went from being inspired and driven by a power greater than me to me running everything. I didn't see it. And all of those circumstances, what they did is they triggered those things within me that I had never addressed. There is a line in a book that my therapist is having me read, and it says, I confused self-avoidance with enlightenment.
Oh, you highlighted that and sent it to me in a screenshot yesterday.
I did.
Yeah.
Huge. When I first came into AA, I was that guy that would tell you, this is the answer for everything, right? As long as you do this and you keep doing it, this is going to get you wherever you want to go. I still believed a lot of that, right? But for me, what I started to do is, all of that stuff that I never addressed became a driving force in who I am in life, including AA. And I don't want to take away from that because it's been really beneficial, but I started working with, and I've always worked with a lot of people, but a lot of that became about, let me avoid myself. And I can tell you that every time that I sat down with someone and I listened to a fifth step, I learned a little bit more about me, and a little bit more about the world and humanity and what makes us tick. But I can also tell you that only took me so far because I have a thirsty spirit. I have I call it my alcoholism. I call it that gift, right, that God has given me. And the one thing my biggest fear was to die not sober, and also that God would remove my alcoholism. I don't ever want that to happen.
Looking back from my perspective, because again, Brave and I knew you when you had 5-6 years
Yes.
of sobriety under your belt, and this goes back to like the we're not cured thing, because I specifically remember the meeting. I know where we were. It's so strange how you have these memories. I remember where we were standing, and you had like 3 guys around you in the back of that big room at Crossroads when you're like, I'm moving to Chicago. And I literally was like, hey, I was, disappointed selfishly. I'm like, oh man, this guy's leaving. That sucks. But if you had asked me if Brave was going to relapse, I would have been like, no way. Like it was impossible. Like as solid of a program as he was working down here, the amount of guys that he was helping through 12-step program, like if I was a betting man, I would have lost that bet for sure. Like, and so I'm curious because moving to Chicago, did you meet your spouse down here or did you move up there to get married?
No. So and it's funny, by the way, I would have been on that bet with you.
Yeah.
I would have never, if you would have asked me, no, I'm going to keep doing this and this is going to carry me through.
And at the time you worked in treatment too. You had several years experience working in treatment.
Yeah. And I hit some rock bottoms, some emotional, spiritual rock bottoms in sobriety. And what we have down here is such a gift. Man, it really is. You don't see this anywhere else. So up in Illinois, we don't have the fellowships that we have down here, and that played a role. So I've known my spouse for a long time. We dated on and off for a long time, but we met down here. We got married down here, but because of my spouse's job, we ended up moving.
So kind of what I was getting at though too is when you went to Chicago. To me, as an outside, correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like you weren't able to do as much as far as the program of AA because that was COVID happened, and a couple minutes ago you mentioned Zoom meetings. You were still doing Zoom. See, we lived in Florida where like meetings stayed open, and just, and maybe this is a little bit of a rabbit trail, but in your opinion, is Zoom the equivalent to going to meetings in person?
I don't want to take away from that.
Yeah.
Plus, I've known. I mean, my recent experiences have made me so open-minded. But also, and I know that a lot of people have gotten sober through those.
Yeah.
You know, so I don't want to take away that experience. For me, that's not how I got sober. And I'm a people person. You know, I need that human interaction. It's also, you know, my brain knows how to manipulate a lot of things. I can manipulate myself. And when you give me enough things in my environment that I can use to hide how I'm doing, to not get vulnerable, I'm going to take advantage of those. If I don't have people, if I don't have the structure that I create to keep me accountable. And I wasn't. I lost track with people down here, and and all of those fears and the shame and the guilt, all of that stuff comes back even before I pick up.
Yeah.
So yeah, dude, as long as I'm connected and I've got people around me and you know, I've got my sponsor, absolutely, you know, that.
So when you went back to Illinois, I mean, it sounds like you went back with good intentions, as everybody does, but considering what you were going back to, and then your mom coming to visit and her dementia and everything like that, it sounds like you just got, I don't know if overwhelmed is the word, but you were taking care of a lot of things or people. You were helping, I'm sure, a lot of people in their sobriety journey, and maybe you just kind of forgot about Brave a little bit.
Yes. And again, I believe that that the journey will show us like what that looks like. But for me, that was a very easy way for, again, hide myself. And again, right, AA and a lot of the work that I do with others helps me work on me. And I believe that's by design. But until now, I never knew what it looked like to be intentional at pouring into me so that I can pour into others. When I heard that, you got to take care of yourself, and I don't want to say first, last, whatever, right? But the moment that you told me that I need to take care of me so that I can take care of others, that concept has always been foreign.
So what's that look like for you, taking care of yourself so that you can take care of others?
So taking care of others makes perfect sense to me. I'll never stop doing that, right? Like that comes naturally to me. I believe, again, that's by design. Taking care of me is coming here. When I was planning on just coming down for 5 days to save my marriage, and ended up not just completing the detox and the residential, but coming here to PHP and seeing it through. It looks like going to therapy and looking at parts of myself that maybe I just wasn't willing to look at, or I wasn't ready for them. It looks like staying humble enough and open to ask for help.
Can I touch on
Yes,
that?
please,
Being humble
please.
enough, having willingness. So I think there's a good lesson, like, because I can't help but sit here and think about like Tom and myself. And, you know, we work in recovery. We've both gone to school for it. You're currently in school. What are you studying? Tell the crowd.
So I'm halfway through my master's in counseling.
So
Yes.
yeah, so all this knowledge, 9 years. Tom and I are at 12, and the part that really hits for me that you just mentioned is the being humble enough.
Yes.
So you said you were going to come down here for 5 days for detox. You just said, and you know, just shy of me kidnapping you. I'm kidding. For those that are listening,
I'm grateful.
But like Tom said earlier, Brave's information came through, and the detox that sent it to me didn't know that I previously knew Brave, and I did. I was like, whoa. In many ways, I was like, whoa. A, I never saw a relapse coming with you. B, I was like, ooh, I get to see an old friend, selfishly. But interestingly enough, you know, I'd heard through the grapevine, you didn't want to do PHP after detox. And I just so happened to be driving by that detox. I was at a venture group, and I texted him. I'm like, hey, you know what? Worst case, let me just swing by and say hi to Brave. He's an old friend. Let me say what's up. What was it that made you change your mind to like like you just said, focus on yourself. Do a full treatment stay, because now you've been total treatment detox till now. It's been what?
About 3 months.
3 months.
Yes.
So it went from 5 days to 3 months.
Yes.
And I reiterate, this is a guy who has previous experience with being sober for years, previous experience with the big book. He's in school for this. He has all the knowledge.
Yes.
Like, what made you change your mind knowing you know everything that you know?
Yeah.
Like, what was it?
Yeah. So again, series of events, right? First of all, why am I here? Why am I in detox? Right? A guy that knows this, a guy that has done this, a guy that is studying this. Why am I here? Right? So that moment of awareness of, okay, maybe there's a story in the big book, right? Physician, heal thyself. Maybe I can't heal myself. And then that starts the process, right? And then recognizing while I'm there in detox, okay, I'm here because I need to fix things. I'm here because I need to fix my marriage, fix work, school, blah, 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 blah. And then getting to that realization of those things may be gone. Why am I here? And I remember that day when I thought, oh man, wow, am I here for me? And that started changing things, and I saw and then I started seeing those moments. Those, we call them God moments, and I believe that God works extra overtime when when I need it, right? And you know, people coming in at the right time, saying the right things, but still said, okay, I'm going to see this through, and then I'm going to go back home because I got to fix these things. Yes, I'm going to work on myself. Yes, but I know this, right? And then Ben showing up, and I remember that day because. I remember feeling that feeling when you started telling me, hey, maybe just take a look at this. Maybe come in for a week, right? And I wanted to say no. And I know that you would have taken a hard no, right?
I would have.
Yeah. But that feeling of me being alone in a corner, not because you wouldn't want to, but because somebody that loves me and that cares about me and that cares about my sobriety has no ulterior motive, wants the best for me. And that's someone that I want in my corner. People like that, especially when I've gone through this journey of relapsing and picking up again and feeling I've never felt so alone. Never felt so alone, right? That nobody knows me, nobody gets me. That feeling where, you know, I'm going to kill myself because I feel so alone, right? And then here I am, this opportunity where I'm starting to get some people to advocate for me. And again, I'm going to put myself in a position where I'm going to say, no, Ben, I got this, right? And I got to experience what it feels like physically for me to be in that corner by myself. I'm putting myself there. And I said, okay, let's take a look at it, right? And the other thing that I told Ben was, especially where I'm at on my journey, I don't want to be a part of anything that I can't fully commit to. Mm-hmm. And I just don't want to, you know, do the half measures. So I kind of had that, you know, ready in my head. It's been a struggle.
Did you have fear and shame with having 9 years and then, lack of a better way to put it, showing your face down here again?
Absolutely. I still do. You know, a lot of my journey, a lot of the things that I've been working through therapeutically as well is where that fear comes from. You know, it's funny because I did the same thing with church. This experience and being here has taught me to appreciate the rooms for what they are, mm-hmm. and the steps for what they are, and the principles for what they are and where they belong. They're a big part of my life. They will always be, right? But I also can appreciate the rooms for the constructs that they are. Our fourth tradition tells us that each group can do whatever it chooses to do, right? But in my head, I tell myself, well, I need to be the example of someone that doesn't fail at whatever it is, right? And I don't give myself permission to be. And I think a lot of people in the rooms may, you know, whether they feel that way or not, it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant, right? But for me, it's important that I recognize that who I work for. I started, you know, again, I work for my higher power. I started working for AA groups. I started working for different things in my life. And I didn't realize when that was happening.
So I want to throw this out there. I forget who I was talking to about this the other day, but somehow the topic of people with significant amount of sobriety time having to come back, I was thinking to myself, God, that would take some serious courage and bravery. No pun intended there, brave. But I just want to throw it out there. AA, we're the most understanding, least judgmental people on the face of the planet. And I just my perspective, regardless of Brave relapsing over 9 years, to me, Brave is still Brave. Like, it literally doesn't change the way that I feel about him. And I just wanted to bring that up because let's call it what it is. We see these cases.
Yes.
There's a lot of people that what's the saying? You get AA gives you a life that takes you out of AA.
Yeah.
And people get caught up with the responsibilities, mom with dementia, all that stuff. The life circumstances can take people away from all the things that helped get them sober. And in the case that somebody does have to come back after years, like, we're our own worst critic. Don't get me wrong. I'd have that fear too. Like, if I were to relapse today and have to walk in and pick up a white chip, I'd be scared to death of what people think about me. But I just want to throw it out there. Like, I don't think Brave is still Brave. It doesn't change anything for me.
Thank you.
Well, the ironic thing about that too is that you going into a meeting, and I've said this before, God forbid Ben relapses. That would be obviously devastating to a lot of people.
Right.
Would it be surprising? To a certain degree, but not really, because we are drug addicts, we're alcoholics, like, we're not, just because it doesn't matter how much time you have. Like, everybody is susceptible to relapse. Or is susceptible the right word?
Yeah.
Yeah. And like Ben, you just said, we're our own worst critic. But really, if you relapse and you don't go and get back involved in the rooms and pick up a white chip or whatever the case is, people are going to feel something. They're going to feel sad. They're going to feel like, not let down, but like, dang, why won't he just come back?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Those sorts of things. In our mind, we're like, oh, I can't believe I just did this. What are people going to think of me? I've let so many people down, so on and so forth. And when you do go in and pick up that white chip, people are really like cheering for you, and it just goes back to our ego, I think, and our pride. And oh my gosh, I had 9 years of sobriety. I'd sponsored all these people. I've taken care of my mom. I've done all this. And I have this life that I have to live up to. And I picked up, am I a freaking idiot or what? No. Now get back in there, pick up your white chip and do that. And I like what you said about, like, you didn't lose that time.
Right.
You just changed the date.
Right.
That
was huge for me. So a couple of things happened when I worked my steps and when I got sober and experienced a sober life. So first of all, I don't see myself any other way other than sober. That something happened when I got sober, which is I found myself. And I did for the first time ever when I worked my steps, when I sat down with another man and I read my fifth step. And when I started listening to fifth steps, I found that part from within me that I call the real self, and the part that I want to reach every time that I sit across from someone. And that's if it wasn't for the steps and AA, I would have never found that. So I don't see myself any other way than sober. So when I lose that, you're taking everything away from my whole world gets shaken upside down, right? So I had to work through the shame, the guilt, the ego, the fears, all of that stuff. And one of the things that I had to work through was recognizing, regardless of what other people might have told me, because not every treatment center is like this one, and not everywhere is like South Florida. Even when people want to take that experience away from me, I did not lose that experience. Life moves forward. I've learned that, right? Like we never start from scratch. Never. Even if I try to start getting sober at 17 by going to a meeting, and it doesn't happen then, and I don't go to my next meeting until 2 years later, I technically started at 17, right? There's experience that happens. The first moment that I try to get sober through some way, shape, or form, that's where my experience trying to get sober starts. Even if I don't make it into treatment, or even if I don't get sober until 10 years later. And I believe we do cause a lot of harm when we let people say, "Oh, I went to treatment 5 times, but this is when I'm really ready." We dismiss those experiences of somebody really trying, but because we look at it as failure, then we tell ourselves, "Okay, maybe I wasn't ready. That didn't count. I'm going to start now." And then when this doesn't work for whatever reason, I'm going to say, "Well, I wasn't ready. Maybe the next one I'll be ready." And I think we take away from that first step. We take away from powerlessness. We take away from the unmanageability, because I'm going to that blank slate that is not blank. There is experience there.
Let me touch on something too. Everyone that listens to the podcast regularly knows, like, I'm a 12-step guy through and through. And I've only heard this secondhand. Obviously, I'm not like sitting in your one-on-one sessions. So Maya here is Brave's therapist. And I just want to throw it out there that Brave has mentioned to me like how much he's gotten out of doing therapy with Maya. Because a lot of times in 12-step rooms, they're like, "Oh, you don't need a therapist. You just need to do 12 steps. And also in the case of Brave, I'm looking at the fact like he's almost done with his master's degree for counseling, yet he's sitting with a therapist. And Tom's touched on this before. He still goes to a therapist. The fact that you've come in here and just a very surface level, what goes on in your one-on-one sessions with your therapist is your business. But like just the little bit Brave has said to me about how much he's getting out of one-on-one therapy. Can you touch on that from your perspective a little bit? Whatever you're comfortable with.
I was that guy that didn't believe in therapy. As a matter of, and I didn't have great experiences with therapy in the past. A lot of it because it just wasn't good therapy, and some of it because I just wasn't ready. But also, I went back to school after 22 years because I didn't have good experiences. Here, what I've experienced is that there are the things that got triggered within me wasn't when I got triggered, when all those things were happening in Illinois, it wasn't my using that got triggered. It was all of that stuff that I hadn't looked at. If there's 1,000 forms of fear, right? And on the surface level, I can even see some of it, especially after going through steps. But there was stuff that I wouldn't have been able to see at all if I hadn't done the deep work. The EMDR, the internal family systems, things that I know for me, I needed to do.
I've never done EMDR. I'm aware of what it is. I've studied it. I've never gotten certified in EMDR. It's something our therapists do here, and they're master's level therapists. Can you explain what EMDR is? Because it's a type of trauma work.
It is.
But it gets mentioned all the time, and I think it'd be good to hear from you.
Sure, absolutely. So EMDR comes from the concept that and I'll make it about me, when I go through experiences in life, especially early on, I don't have the proper cognition to process them, right? So when I go through experiences in my childhood that could be traumatic, I'm going to experience them the best way that I can, which is I'm going to have the experience and then I'm going to repress it. I'm going to deny it as a child, right? And then as I grow up, and I start becoming an adult and I develop cognition, I can deal with life more effectively, but I never dealt with that stuff from my childhood, right? That stuff was just put away. That stuff continues to show up in my life. So for me personally, a lot of that was abandonment, was fear of failure, was not being able to be vulnerable. So EMDR helps me go back, identify some of those experiences, and process them with my current awareness. And what happens is that, for me, what I have found is, first of all, I have found, okay, now I understand myself a little bit better, so I can complete that puzzle. But I can also have more grace and forgiveness for myself and for everyone around me, because I don't have to put the blame on me for reacting to life the way that I react. And I can now understand why some of those reactions happen instead of just denying it while they're happening. Right. So if I walk into a room and somehow I'm feeling the anxiety and the fear and the discomfort of being there because it's full of people, and I try to deflect with humor or whatever, right? It may be that I've always done. Now I can understand, okay, I'm feeling it because of these reasons, and I can be okay with it. I can process it in the moment. So it doesn't have to be something that festers. You know, when I'm doing, it's almost like it's doing 10 steps, right? It's doing 4th and 5th steps. But it's just going a little bit deeper. I believe that therapy and the steps have more in common than we would like to believe they do. And for me, again, I need both. They both complement each other so well. Good therapy, current therapy, not old therapy. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, because you seem like somebody that's well-rounded in the sense of, you believe in therapy heavily. You believe in 12-step program. You choose to do AA. And I think I recall you saying something about church.
Yes.
As well.
Yes.
So you're a man of faith.
Absolutely.
Whatever faith that is, it's irrelevant, really. I mean, So we have 3 components here. We have a therapeutic component with a primary therapist. We have a 12-step program that is comprised of, I suppose, a therapeutic component, but also community and service work. And then you have your and within the 12-step program, you have a spirituality component, but then you have your church and the spirituality component there. A lot of times people seem to take one, and because I have this one, I don't need these others. Or one blames the other. And listen, full transparency, not for myself, but AA in general, not in general. There are people out there that say, you don't need a therapist. You just need to work 12 steps. Or the church, you don't need the AA program because you just need to come to church. And so you see a lot of this like back and forth. You don't see it a lot, but it's there. And I think it's ridiculous.
Yes.
How have you found kind of balance within that? Because I think I remember you saying something along the lines of church with your 12-step program. Have you ever noticed that within your own recovery, stuff like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, Tom, it's been really a hard journey of don't let the ugliness of some of the trees divert you from the beauty of the forest. I've got a lot of ugly trees in my past, in my present, from religious upbringing, from the society, even from within AA. Those people, right? I was probably one of those people that would tell you, okay, church doesn't work, therapy doesn't work, because of my own experiences. So for me, it's been, some of it has been rock bottoms, hitting the wall. And then through the steps, my foundation of steps of developing that awareness with a higher power, that has been foundational for me. So it's been seeing what I call God in everything. So what I'm seeking for is I'm seeking God in my religious experience, whatever that may look like. In therapy, for me, God has to be in my therapeutic experience, right? Because he's so foundational for me. And it's in everything, right? So in AA, we have this foundation, right? Where I get to realize God is either everything or God is nothing. So for me, it's been seeing God in everything. And that has kept me continuing to seek and continuing without judgment and identify, what works, what doesn't, and not throwing the baby with the bathwater type of thing, right? Just being open.
Were you always that way though? Like if you can look back at and the reason I ask this is because we started this series kind of on the 12 steps, and you again referenced God is either everything or he is nothing. And Ben brought this up.
I literally referenced the same thing.
On the step 2 episode. My question for you is, were you always this way? What did it look like when you first came into the rooms and, you saw the steps for the very first time and you saw step 2, came to believe that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity? Did I get that right?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. That was impressive, Ben.
Gold star.
What was that like?
Yeah.
When the first time you saw that,
Right.
what was that like?
So, it's interesting. I went to my first treatment episode was 30 days. They took me to meetings. I'm sure they talked about steps. I made the subconscious decision that it wasn't for me. I had caught this early on, right? So then when I picked up again right after, and I knew that I couldn't stop and I was going to go to prison because I couldn't stop and decided to work the steps, God was one of those things that I just didn't want anything to do with, because just like a child hides from their parents, and the less that my parents see, the less in trouble I get. That's the way that my relationship was with God. The less God sees, then the less in trouble I'm going to be, right? Because I heard, and just because something is said doesn't mean that I hear it that way. But what I heard throughout my childhood is that God really does not like me at all. Right? There are lots of parts about me that God doesn't like. And so I just didn't want anything to do with it. So that was hard. It was hard. What broke the ice, what did it for me, was when I sat down with my first sponsor, who I did not want to get honest about a lot of things. And he shared his story with me, right? And then he told me that I was perfectly created. That God doesn't make any mistakes. And that as a result, I am not a mistake. I never felt that. I never felt that I actually had a purpose and a reason to be here. So that started my journey with being open to a power greater than me, that I could love, that I could connect with. And it went from there. That eventually. So AA was my church. The steps were my prayer, and my higher power was. That same God that my sponsor had, that apparently saw value in me, that God that accepted me. And that's where it started. And then that obviously brought me back to church and brought me to other places.
That's so interesting, because literally that's such a huge part of my story too. And that's what we were talking about in the Step 2 episode. I didn't want anything to do with God. How could God be the solution? Look at my life right now. If there was a God, I wouldn't be in this predicament. But like the willingness to just, let me check this out. Let me stick my toe in the pond of AA. And now here you are in church. Like it just kind of, what did Matt say?
Matt who?
People find God that weren't even looking for God.
Mm.
Oh, Matt, the knife?
The knife, yeah. Matt Anderson.
Yeah, I don't know. Probably something like that.
Something along those lines. We help people find God that wasn't even looking for God.
Yeah, I think the obstacles, and it's the constructs, church was an obstacle, the way that I was experiencing it. AA has been an obstacle for me in different groups. I don't want to say AA, but different groups. If I go to a group and it doesn't resonate, doesn't mean that I can't go to another one and experience God, right? That's the beautiful thing about, and I hate that we do that. I can't hate it, but as human beings, I think we do that, right? We have one experience and then we color all of it based on that experience. And I develop prejudices, and I develop judgments, and I develop fears based on my first experience. Yes, that's how I work as a human. But I think the journey of recovery, me being here, is about challenging those judgments and challenging what my perceptions because of those experiences, and going further and trying harder and persevering and not giving up, right? And just because I went to a group, and that group was judgmental, and they told me, a lot of things that made me feel like crap, doesn't mean that every group is going to be that way.
Mm-hmm.
Or doesn't mean there's nothing you can't pull from that group.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Right. So there is a combination of me not judging, remaining open-minded, and me continuing to move my feet to follow the path that my higher power has laid out for me already. But I have to walk. Yes, will I get carried? Absolutely. But I need to walk that path. And that path will take me, will bring me back to Florida for treatment. That path will take me to new people. That path will take me to new experiences with therapy. That path will take me to new experiences with religion and church and AA. I also believe, and it's been my experience, that the more, and that's going back to what does it look like for me to be put into so that I can help others, the more I can experience that personal growth, the more I can be effective at being of service to others. And I closed myself off when I decided, okay, this is it. There is nothing else. It's funny, part of me feels like a child that is curious to know more, because the well is endless. It's deep and it's endless. There is no limit to our growth and to our experiences. And as a byproduct of that, there is no limit to how far we can help someone go.
That's what God, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, for me, like, it's about evolving.
Yes.
So everything you just say, if I could put it in a nutshell, from my experience, the second AA meeting I ever went to in my life, the chairperson basically shamed me because I didn't know how to introduce myself properly in a meeting. Granted, it was only my second meeting. And it's funny how it evolves, because I was like, well, screw AA. I'm never going back there. To later, the lesson was from that meeting, because I had to go back. I didn't know where else to go. So I tried a different meeting. But what I learned from that is, well, I'm never going to act like that guy towards a newcomer. And then, so then I found the meetings that I enjoyed and liked. But now it's funny, because today I'll go to a meeting and I'll be like, ooh, their message is a little off. So, quote unquote, in my opinion,
yes,
not one of the good meetings. But I'm like, well, now I'm going to go to that not good meeting to help carry a message. Right. So it's funny. I had a buddy that used to tease me, and he'd be like, there's the 8:30 meetings, up at Oasis back in the day. They call them the Dirty 30, because everybody, puts on their best dress and basically like trying to get a date in there. Had Tom explain.
I mean, it's kind of trashy. It really is. Let's be honest.
And my buddy was like, and we both had years of sobriety at this point, and he says to me, well, I only go to meetings with guys who have 25 plus years and they're all 60 and over. And I'm like, well, good for you, dude. I'm like, I go to the 8:30 because they're the people that need to hear the message. Right. That's where the newcomers are, the people that need the help. So it's funny how motives change, and the way I evolve from my very first meeting to being shamed and not wanting to go back to, I'm never going to act like that guy, to now I found some good meetings. Now I'm going to go to some bad meetings to hopefully bring a good message. Yeah,
it's funny you say that, because so for me, it's also, you talk about the evolution, right? The evolution of me as an alcoholic in AA and on this journey of recovery. And for me, what it's also identifying those things that I can be true to, those principles that I believe work for me, and then what does that look like along the path? Because I also went through that period of time where I felt like, well, what I'm doing is the only thing that's right. And I became very legalistic within AA. And I think that's part of the growing process, right? But then I was no different from the people that I was judging, saying that they were doing it wrong, because I had no room for anything else, right? And I couldn't meet people where they were at. Mm-hmm. So for me, it's been so important, especially again with my current experience, to acknowledge that every single person, especially in recovery, is exactly where they're at for a reason, because that's where they're at. So if I happen to be experiencing a solution or be somewhere else, I have to meet them where they're at to bring them along, and not expect them to meet me where I'm at, because they're not going to be able to do that. And that requires a level of openness and humbleness and awareness, and a level of being okay with me and secure enough on my own beliefs and ideas and understandings that doesn't happen if I am not okay with me, right? And I've been there, right? And I feel, but I'm also aware that I can lose that. And I can, part of what happened in Illinois is again, it's so fundamental. I tried to fit in with some of the groups that were there, and I started compromising what I believed to be true, because I needed to fit in somewhere, or I felt like I needed to fit in somewhere. And that was very damaging for me and my recovery, because I started selling out. I'm grateful for that part of my journey. I know not to sell out, but I also know to be open and loving and caring and tolerant.
Mm-hmm.
For the sake of time, let's get into what your path is moving forward. So you're obviously transitioning out of here, and looks like you're taking a one-way flight to Illinois. Then what?
Then so that was scary when I first realized that, because I'm going back to the same environment and the same circumstances that got me here to begin with. And my first week here, I had that realization and I thought, oh my God, nothing is going to change. So what's different? I have to be different. So I'm going different. I'll never be a finished product. I'm going to continue with whatever it is that I need to take care of there. I'm getting a therapist, which I didn't have before. I'm continuing the deep work. And I don't get too far ahead. I still feel passionate about the work that I want to do in recovery and for others. God has seen it fit that I have kept my schooling and a lot of the things that I believe in. Those things haven't been taken away from me. I haven't relinquished those things to my alcoholism, and hopefully I can, with God's help, those can be protected. And I'm going with an open mind. I'm not holding on to anything. I'm not holding on to any outcomes. And I know that's going to change as I go back and as I continue. So I'm going to have to be intentional at going back to that place where, okay, I'm having this experience and I'm attaching to this outcome with whatever it may be, my mother, family, anything. And going back to surrendering it, right? Third step, turning my will and my life over to God's care, situation by situation by situation.
Well, listen, for what it's worth, Brave, like I said in the beginning, you've been an asset to the community. You know, certain people, when they transition back home, you're kind of worried. You know, you're like, oh boy, you don't know how this is going to turn out. I feel pretty confident, you know, obviously without putting a guarantee on things,
Yes.
which you can't do that with anybody.
Yes.
I feel like you got it. You got a good, solid foundation, good head on your shoulders, and you know what you want to do. And I think you're good in the sense of, like, you can recognize when you need to make a change. And if that happens, I think you're the first person that will admit, I need to make a change, and you'll make it. Whatever that looks like. If it's coming back to Florida, if it's, you know, who knows?
Right.
I know that you're confident enough that you can do those. So I appreciate you coming on here, man.
Thank you. No, thank you. And thank you for what you have here.
Yeah.
It's man, you know, it's a place of healing, and it's, you know, I don't know about anyone else, right? But for me, I needed to be at the right time and to be able to embrace it. It's a place where I found myself and the God within me again. And that self-worth, that inherent worth that we talk about over and over. So it's a big part of my journey. It's good to have places that anchor me, you know, that anchor you. It's good to have those things in my life that anchor me to whether it's here, whether I'm right there or not. I think it's good.
Well, we're glad we could be a part of it.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah.
For those that can't see the video, there's tears running down his face. And honestly, I'm not like putting you on blast for it. Like, that's the part that I love about this, is when you get to see that in person, like, you know, someone speaking from the heart.
And there's me that gets super uncomfortable. I'm like, oh shoot, what do I say now?
What? Your eyes are getting a little watery there, Tom.
No, well, I mean, it was very.
Look, he's turning red.
Now I'm turning red. See, what? God,
that was it. No, it's a beautiful thing to be a part and like see someone, you know, they're speaking from the heart, and it's, what do they call it? The language of the heart.
Yeah, well, for me, that's where sobriety's at, because I've done it from my head. I'm very good at that too. But it just doesn't translate to what doesn't touch my spirit, my heart.
Well, we're going to wrap this up, Brave. Again, super blessed to be a part of your journey, and it's been super cool. When do you leave? Next week?
Next week.
Yeah.
Next
so
week.
we got another week.
Yes.
And then you know, maybe you could pop back down to Florida every now and again.
Absolutely.
And maybe we'll do a Zoom podcast or something, or some sort of remote thing. You could do them. I'm not a huge fan of them, but we'll do it. Ben, any final thoughts?
Thank you for letting me kidnap you. It's kind of funny because there's a couple clients that came from the same detox after Brave, and they're like, Brave went to go talk to Ben, and then he just never came back. They didn't even know he was leaving.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was but that's in my experience, I was trained to just say yes to things that make sense.
Yeah.
So all the training that I got in AA, thank God for that, because I can continue to do that. Hopefully I have the strength and the humbleness to continue to say yes to things that make sense.
Yeah.
I'm glad I got to spend a couple months with the friends.
I'm so grateful.
All right. Well, that is it for this episode of Real Recovery Talk. Thank you for tuning in. In the end, if you have any comments, questions, or concerns, you could always reach out to us. Tom at realrecoverytalk.com and Ben at realrecoverytalk.com. And ultimately, what we're trying to do is help you turn your mess into your message. That is it. We will see y'all later.